This recent full blue moon in Sagittarius is like Christmas come early. Jupiter, as it historically does, left gifts and is leaving gifts all along the way. It's all along its transit. But this full moon in particular, significantly being a blue moon, lived up to its hype in terms of bringing things in that weren't really on the radar, or that we weren't really expecting. And this is the question that I considered through the pre-shuffle. And one of the most clear answers that I observed, even through my own realization and through my personal experience, was that this full moon has brought in closure at a time when we weren't really necessarily expecting it, in a form that we weren't expecting it, by way of, in measures that we weren't expecting it. And give it time, if not so much, because it may still be unfolding for you, given the moon was just yesterday. But the closure is coming by way of clarity, by an elevated perspective of clarity. No, there was a way it was posed to me. Clarity, here it is, clarity through an elevated perspective of truth. That's what I heard. And particularly of past experiences that may have been traumatic, unfavorable, confusing, even open-ended. And in some ways, you may not receive all the answers to all the open-ended questions, but there's something that happened for me in my meditation and pre-shuffle where it was just a deep understanding of where you are now and how you feel about what you've experienced, and how you are settling upon the truth of your perspective at this moment, to bring closure to seasons past, so that you can progressively and hopefully prosperously move ahead through the future. So we're going to take a little, carry this into this message. That's my intention, and see what else comes up. But hello, it's me, Danae. I'm here with a message for you. Today is June 1st, 2026. Let's see what time it is on the clock. 2:23 on the clock. And this is the question that we're going to ponder together through this message. As I said, it could be unfolding for you, or you could have had a revelation just today or yesterday, or you could be, you may come to a point of clarity through this very message. Whatever the case may be, I hope that you will open yourself up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, to receive this closure that I'm speaking of. No matter where you are at this present time, closure is always welcomed, because, generally speaking, you can't really start fresh without handling, sewing up old business, or taking care of open-ended circumstances. And really the name of the game for this season, even, I had to actually look to see where Jupiter actually is right now, even as Jupiter is about to embark on a brand new transit through Cancer. I thought it was interesting that as we had the full moon in Sagittarius, but in Gemini season, Jupiter is just still, you know, in its last day, according to what I researched, in Gemini, and is on its way into Cancer just tomorrow. So as I said, it's like where Jupiter transits, it leaves a gift behind in that sign, and no doubt is preparing to start handing out gifts in the sign to come. And as I said, I feel like the closure is to have a deep understanding, maybe even understanding, but from an elevated perspective, so that now the true evolving, maybe even healing, you know, on a deeper level can begin as Jupiter is transiting into Cancer, where you can start to find your comfort, you know, to solidify your comfort and security in the most intimate places and spaces where you reside. That being maybe in your home spaces, bringing a new balance of peace to your home, emotionally speaking, especially, but certainly in the comforts that you create from the inside out, your own personal security with self. So as I said, you kind of need to sew up the unresolved, I keep saying open-ended, but unresolved issues, or, you know, yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. Unresolved circumstances and issues before you can now move forward. And so that is a gift in itself, to be settled, to be affirmed by how things are being left or released even, so that now you can start building again. Maybe start laying a whole new foundation or groundwork for a new establishment of identity. All right, so let's see where we are in the cards. I hope you're doing well and that you have had a great weekend, maybe had a great full moon experience. As for me and my house, oh snap, we rested all day long. Oh, look, Queen of Wands, and it was upright, gratefully. We rested all day long on Sunday, like the most full day of rest that I can remember, where I didn't feel compelled to do something. Laundry, clean, cook. My cooking was at a minimum. It was leftovers and pizza in the oven and, you know, stuff like that. I mean, we ate, but it wasn't, no stress, no strain whatsoever. Like, I completely allowed myself, it was so crazy because there were several invitations extended to me to do stuff that would have been fun, you know, generally, but I declined, you know, like, no, this needs to be a day off the grid and full rest, reflection, relaxation, and release. And that's what we did. That was my decision of choice for how I would expend my energy. And my son was happy to oblige, just to rest in his games. All right, so let's see what else we got. He likes to be out in the streets more than me, though, believe it or not. And I'm the fire sign. But any opportunity to be on the road, he's here for it. And some of the invitations I didn't even tell him about because he would have pressured me if I did. Yep. 2:29 lighting up on the clock. That's almost an 11:11. Yeah, here's some clarity here. Okay. All right. So back to the message at hand, where we are right now. I'm getting that here's the clarity. All right. But it's something about being confident, and I felt like composed is coming up too, to activate yourself in a way that makes you that puts you in alignment with this revelation of truth, again, of clarity, of confirmation, of closure even. And not only does it bring a sense of affirmation as a gift, but it also empowers you in a way that, here it is, here's the past, present, future aspect of it all. Because whatever this revelation or clarity is, it's affirming who you've been up until this point, even the decisions that you've made, or um, how you've been activated to create or to construct your life experience up until this point, is being affirmed. So if there was any question or doubt about that, that's being made clear by what's being downloaded in this present moment. And sometimes we don't really know how much we actually need that affirmation until we have it, because we just face each challenge or each new project, or even just the normal mundane goings on about life, you know what I mean? Business as usual to a certain degree, just kind of meeting every invitation where it summons us. And through our instincts, managing what gets to happen as we confront each case. But sometimes you don't realize, like, you don't get to sit and take inventory of, like, almost a review, I would say, of the choices you've made up until this point, how exactly they have affected you or impacted you in real time. Like, if you hadn't done this, you wouldn't be here, or if you would have done this, who knows where you'd be at this point, like stuff like that. Sometimes you don't have a moment to affirm yourself. And that's not for the sake of stroking ego, it's for the sake of building confidence and courage so that you can face what's next, and so that you can go about life in a more assured way, where it's not just a matter of, like, blindly, not to say that it absolutely is, but where you're just, as I said, facing what comes in the best way you possibly can, sometimes without much confidence, or without much affirmation or confirmation that you've even done well in the past to know that you're absolutely doing okay now. I'm rambling, but what I'm trying to get to, because I think it's important, is that this revelation is the gift, because it's letting you know you're doing great. And maybe it might even be specifically letting you know exactly where you've done the absolute best that you could, where you've done well, maybe where you've excelled, and rolling that all up into one positive review, so that you know just how what's the word, competent you are. Even more than competent, qualified, I would say, but something feels more than that. I can't think of something more than that, because it's not just baseline, but let's say competent and qualified just on a foundational level to meet any challenge, to surmount any obstacle. And if you can do that on the grandest scale, then certainly the mundane things of life are a piece of cake. You know what I mean? It's like, if you can reflect upon your life when you were faced with great challenge, where the stakes were high and maybe the odds were against you, and feel affirmed in how you managed those circumstances and how you handled yourself. I think that's where the composure is coming in. And you feel some type of affirmation. It might just be within your own spirit, but it could come from the outside in as well, that you did okay, you did a good job. Then that gives you a boost of confidence to know exactly what you're capable of. And it gives you a certain boost of courage to know that there is no insurmountable odds. There are no insurmountable odds. So something about that here, you know, some type of revelation and affirmation is going to be pivotal in how you ultimately manifest, create, attract, and what you attract moving forward. Okay, that makes sense, because it's about the truth that we tell ourselves, even the ways that we combat the illusions and the lies and the projections. Sometimes we find ourselves having to overextend ourselves against those adversary intrusions, you know, and especially with a deficit, perhaps, or a deficiency in affirmation for the past or the present. So it's something here about coming to some type of realization about how powerful you actually are, so that it shifts your mentality and your what is it, like your sense of self is somehow purified and cleansed and then elevated in a way that makes you that much more attractive for things that you actually desire to obtain, possess, achieve, acquire, that surely deserve to be in your orbit or in your auric field, and less of, if not none of, this makes so much sense, particularly on the prayer that I wrote for this moon, which I'm not going to share yet, but I will at some point. Less of, if not none of, the stuff that you don't. So here's what I'm trying to say here, and I think it's been a roundabout way of saying it, but it's fleshing out for me too in real time. It's like, with all the strength and instinct and creativity that you may possess naturally, as I said, there's been a deficiency of certainty in the past, especially up until now. Hopefully the move forward is what we're being gifted, the clarity altogether, so that none of that adverse stuff can resonate or reside in your force field. But up until now, you've had to probably operate quite phenomenally against great odds that were projecting the most contrary energy towards you, not just to combat who you are naturally, but also, well, to resist who you are naturally, but also to combat where you are, what you're evolving into, or who you're evolving into. And nonetheless, like, the phenomenal aspect of it all is that you kept that passion burning, you kept your eye on the prize, you kept refocusing in on what's true, what is productive, what is prosperous. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't without like without challenge, let's say, because of all that was coming your way to resist. Now, left alone to your own devices, you would probably have evolved in a much more easeful way. Maybe not in all the ways that you have, so there's that part too, because that resistance helped to kind of like bring out the best in you as well, bring out the gifts. Here it is, the gifts in you that you may not have even known to cultivate or to curate, because you didn't necessarily need to. But anyway, that's a side note. The point that I'm trying to make here is that now, knowing all that you know about yourself, what you're capable of in the most dire straits, or sometimes in the most diabolical circumstances, with the most stringent resistances and oppositions, it kind of like elevates you and evolves you into, exalts you into somewhat of a almost omniscient state omnipotent. That's what omniscient, because of the Ace of Swords, but with the wand, like almost omnipotent state of being, because there is no worthy opponent that you can't triumphantly face if need be. And now when you squaring up, it's not with a hint of, I think, I think I'm good enough, but I'm not too sure, or I think I got the power, I think I got the force, or I think I know what I'm doing, like I think I can handle this. It's not a consideration. It's not a question mark, it's a knowing. It's a deep knowing, because there's evidence now that you can reflect upon and review, that affirms that knowing. Where you are in this present moment affirms that truth. And as a Sagittarius energy is, like, you can see all angles that again kind of support that knowing, with the visual, aspect of truth through evidence, not just the lofty concept or an ideal, or even as Sagittarius energy can be, the blind optimism of it all, where you might know the odds are against you or they're great risk, but you'll take the leap anyway. It's like still having all those instincts intact, but now having the evidence to support just how resilient and how magnificent is coming up and powerful you actually are. Man, I hope that was conveyed well, because I know it's, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I mean, simply put, you had some great forces up against you to keep you from realizing who you are and to keep you from being any better than who you already are. And for the most part, if you've stayed in alignment with your own personal integrity and with the truth of the divine, and like I said, kept refocusing on what's real, what's honest, what's righteous, what matters, at this point in time, it should be clear to you that you're a force to be reckoned with, and that those forces that pitted themselves against you, just there's no comparison, as there shouldn't be. And so therefore there's really no threat. Imagine that level of elevated confidence. Moving around, and here it is, I'm getting chills too, because it's like, I don't know, like I just get, maybe it's the chicken or the egg concept, but I just get, it's like you had all that confidence and power and creativity and instinct in tow when there were great odds against you. But imagine now having all of that, how can I say, like magnified now to and evolved at such a greater level. And now it's like no enemy in sight. Not saying that that's altogether true, because we know there's always something looking to be resistant. But I guess it's like, it may feel like that, you may have that sense about you through your confidence, and like that sense of security about yourself, where there is no worthy opponent as far as you can see and as far as you can tell. And maybe that's because there actually isn't, because they've been defeated by their own indiscretions, more or less. Or maybe it's just because, again, where you see things and where you see yourself, like your perspective is so elevated and evolved and ascended, that even if an enemy presented itself to you, meaning to be so, that's not how you would perceive it firsthand. It's just like, oh, such and such, oh yeah, all right, I know what they doing over there. Or this thing's coming up against me, okay, as a horn blows. Like, okay, well, that's nothing. We can find a solution, or we can find a way around, or resolve to, to surrender in a way that makes sense. Like, whatever it calls for, it's just like no sweat off your back type of energy, like, I don't even know if I feel it more than I can say it. And maybe that's the thing. It's like a personal feeling that you'll have, and maybe you might not realize it until you realize it. Like me saying it, maybe it puts you on alert or on guard to look out for it, or maybe you want to reflect where you've already had this level of confirmation of your esteem, or elevated esteem. But it's something about it being affirmed in a very direct way. Like, damn, okay. Like I was saying before, it's like you don't have the time to reflect when you're in motion, when it's one thing after the next, when you're having to watch your back and your front, you just are living in the moment. But it's something about that dust settling and there almost being a peace, a hush, in your force field, where you don't hear that clamor of obstinance or resistance like you used to. And it's something about like a new altitude that's being achieved now, in some way, shape, or form, maybe mentally, but definitely energetically, maybe all the things, that it's like you're on a whole different plane now. Similar to how a plane climbs above the clouds, and then that takeoff is weird, as I've spoken about my personal experience of takeoff versus landing. And takeoff for me is always more nerve-wracking than actually the landing, because at least you're coming back down to earth. But when you're ascending, it's just like the rumbling and the shaking, and sometimes going through the clouds and maybe hitting a little turbulence on the way up, and the engine is roaring and you're on an incline and so on and so forth. But then when you get to that optimum altitude and the plane levels out, sometimes you almost forget you're even in the air. Damn. Wow. Until you hit a little patch of turbulence and you're like, oh shit, forgot we was up here. but we ain't talking about that. We talking about that smooth sailing right there. That, yeah. So there it is, depicted in what I just said. It doesn't mean that there may not ever be any turbulent experience, but just where you are in your own personal security and your own personal esteem is so supreme that it's like, yeah, I know we up high. I know there's a lot to lose. I know there's a lot to gain, but we got this. We're protected. If anything, like the pilot got this. For me, whenever I feel nervous about turbulence on a flight, hey, maybe some of y'all about to go on vacation or are going or vacationing and getting away from, business as usual, and finding your retreat. Maybe that's even your reward for all your hard work, whatever the case may be. Safe travels to you. When I look around and the stewardess are calm, and which I'm sure they're trained to be, right? But when I look around and they're not panicking, they're not running to their seats, maybe they're still passing out drinks and snacks, and I'm like, okay, all right, we straight. And you don't hear whatever. I ain't gonna go too deep on that, but you might be a stewardess, what's the right word? Like presence for someone else, that's on their way up, or that's a little less secure about the ascension process, or about evolving in a certain way, or experiencing life on a different level. You might be the one that people look to when they see like, oh, well, they look like they are all right, so maybe I'm okay too. you know, so that's a little side note there. And I would say that also contributes to the gift of Jupiter, as I'm saying, where that confidence and security and optimism is infused with your instincts and makes you someone that others can be inspired by, you know, or comforted by, even when you're not trying to be. That's a gift in itself, you know. So yeah. And that also speaks to a sense of affirmation of just how far you've come or how much you've grown when you've actually become an example for someone else, you know. That's beautiful. All right, let's keep going because I only got 2 cards out. I just keep getting stabbed. That was a 2 of Pentacles, but thankfully it popped in and popped out because I think it's time to release the uncertainties. That was the Strength card. Yeah, we too affirmed in our strength and our courage. Yeah, to know that whatever decisions need to be made, whether it be in an instant, by instinct, or with deep deliberation, you are equipped, you know, like, again, you are qualified to do what's best. You have the evidence already that's gotten you to this point, and you're on a trajectory to maintain that frequency no matter what. And it's literally given chosen, you know, like I said, there's like selection here by the divine where you have presented yourself to be available, willing, you know, what's the word, like a viable candidate, you know, or something like that, for ascension. You had to present yourself qualified for this level of promotion before it would take effect. And with the Queen of Wands, that's definitely zeroing in on actions that you've already taken before the before the confirmation, or what's the word that I want to say, like appointment. There it is. Like actions that you've already taken in integrity before the appointment, that then comes with what? All of the favor, the fortune, the spoils, the rewards that the lovers experience being in divine alignment. It just comes with the territory, but you certainly get to prove yourself an exceptional candidate for such, again, when the odds are all against you, hoping that you never make it to this point, hoping that somewhere along the lines you can be distracted or detoured or tempted to choose something other than the most ideal, the most optimum choice, to make something less than the most optimum choice for yourself, particularly against your own personal integrity, so that would disqualify you from even being considered. But this is talking to someone, you know, again, this is like a review, a reflection. This is talking to someone that no matter what the odds, and even when there might have been criticisms and judgments and opinions that maybe acted in accordance as well as opposition or resistance, you still maintained your own foundation of confidence and courage despite all that again was hard up for confirmation and affirmation. Like, you literally, there's a gospel song called Encourage Yourself, and sometimes you had to be the only one that could see the vision and understand the alignment that you were committed to and stay devoted to it, you know, or the alignment that you were submitting to, and to stay devoted to it when, and many times it didn't make sense to do so, you know. So, or as to say, in many ways it may not have made sense to do so. So if you could do that then, at that point, Now, again, knowing all that you know about then, and knowing all that you know about who you are now, it's like I said, it's like heaven on earth. Literally, it's like a cakewalk. The streets are paved with gold as far as you're concerned. That's your new truth, your new normal. In the midst of all the things that are going on, and even some ways going wrong, that you can see, that you can perceive. There's no delusion here, but it's like something about where you stand, where you are, or where you have ascended to, that somehow is not impactful to the reality that you're creating for yourself. It's like when you do go on vacation, or you're ascending to travel wherever, like if you're lucky, you're leaving everything behind. Work, stress. Like when you're getting ready to go on vacation and you know it's going to be a good time and you're looking forward to it, you're not thinking about what's going on back home, or what you left, or what's on the ground, especially if you're going to another country or something like that. You ain't thinking about the drama in America. You're hoping that you can actually forget about it, at least while you're going. So it's like something about where you're headed. I just heard, where's that? What's that saying? Where we're going, you don't need roads. I think that's like a car tag or something, like one of the car companies, either Ford or something like that. I think so. Where we're going, or where you're going, you don't need roads or something like that. So yeah, it's like you on a new level. What's going on the ground, and symbolically the ground being on a lower frequency, you know what I mean? Not necessarily on the earth or where you live or whatever, but on the lowest frequency of that reality, is more or less of no concern to you. Unless you want to make it your concern, but you would still be approaching that from a higher perspective, not being consumed by that lower frequency. Bringing something of value to that reality, hopefully, or something enhancing. Again, by choice, not by force. Ooh, that's in reverse. Ooh, but I love it. What? Get out of here. And I hope you saw that on camera, how they both popped out in reverse. Wow. If there are any two cards you want to come out in reverse, there's probably these, and maybe the Ten of Swords or the Ten of Wands. Maybe, because then there could be a consideration of, a cycle not closing, because even when it's the worst, you still want it to end. But this is good money right here. That means there's, again, clarity. It's so contrary to the Lovers, the two, well, actually complementary, as I should say, to the Lovers. If it was in the upright, it would be contrary, but the Two of Swords is exactly what I've been speaking of, like just being sure of, there it is, being sure of yourself, and not in an arrogant way, not in a way that is harmful to you or to anyone else, but no longer living in that state of insecurity that is just natural to humanity, unfortunately. Actually, it's learned. We don't come here insecure as babies. We learn that behavior, but it becomes such a part of a way of life that it feels natural. So it's something here about, returning to that organic nature of security that maybe was always designed for you to live in, and having like almost being reborn in a sense into a new aspect of self where the confidence is just irrefutable. You know, the certainty about your skill sets, about your ability to manifest through anything, alchemize any situation, create something out of nothing, succumb any challenge, you know, protect yourself, you know, against those resistances, even the ones that would want to arise within yourself, within you, is again the gift. It's so empowering to know that, to feel like you can trust yourself to make hard decisions, makes the easy ones just, I don't even know. It is so empowering with the Eight of Wands and Eight of Swords in reverse, because it means that you have liberated yourself not just from the captivity that was projected upon you, but even the bars of that captivity or the chains of that captivity that you made agreement with. Somehow all of that is being overturned. I said this in one of the last messages. I think it may have been the most recent one, where I said like something about this full moon felt like an eclipse energy, like things being really like completely vanished, you know, almost like out of nowhere. Like where did that go? Where did that insecurity go? Where did that feeling of disempowerment go? Where did my uncertainty go? Where did my fear go? You know, where did my apathy go, or that procrastination, or, you know, reluctance, or whatever, you know, all of that stuff again, that really had no jurisdiction over your being except for what you gave authority to: people, places, and things. But starting within first and foremost, because when you can liberate yourself from the agreements that you've made and what you've told yourself on account of projections and, you know, so on and so forth, it makes it hard for anything else to really resonate that's projected outside of you, because it needs to latch on to something that you already are holding on to. Damn. Yeah. So that's why here it is on the mystical side, a lot of the intense projections and spells and curses and rituals and everything else that folks was probably trying to throw at you throughout this entire month, let alone through this full moon, couldn't really stick. They couldn't really hold the way that they may have in the past, or especially not in the way that they were intended to. I mean, I'm telling you, people were throwing, I said in one message, like, not just everything but the kitchen sink, they were throwing the kitchen sink too. Like everything that they could hurl at you, every criticism to you or about you, you know, every criticism, every all the condemnation, all of every past insecurity that they thought they could play on, of which clearly doesn't reside with you anymore, playing on that, all your the outdated, like some energies were really trying to reach you at a place where they knew you lived at one point in time, or reach out to energies that resided within you at one point in time, or to reawaken, or replant even those energies that you had liberated yourself from or released, but they had no idea the great feat they were up against with someone that, unbeknownst to them, even up until, like I said, most recently, because you were just going through the motions, is very secure in who they are and in who they're not. You can't really play with somebody like that. You can't play in their face. You can't play behind their back. You can't play, in their auric field, in their dream state. You just can't, because the truth will be too clear. Sagittarius energy, I see. You'll see right through the bullshit. And if you are not in agreement with what's being projected to you from the outside in or the inside out, it has nowhere to land. It's just circling the freaking the airspace, hoping to find a runway to touch down on, but it never will find one when you're living on a certain vibration. Now, you decide to lower your frequency, like I said, that's a choice. You make yourself more susceptible to those attachments making themselves at home again. But this is not giving that. Like I said, it might have been a little bit tumultuous to make the ascent, but I'm talking to somebody that if you aren't experiencing now, you're about to experience that leveling out, where there is no traffic. There better not be, unless you're in Newark Airport airspace, then I don't know. No shade. All right, let's see. Let's get us a couple more, and then we out. This came up in the pre-shuffle too. It's something about the past, but it's like I said, it's like a rebirth. And to me, this is given, like I was saying, a rebirth of innocence in a way, or like, your organic nature, where it's not like the innocence where you are vulnerable to attacks because you have no boundaries or you trust anybody, and no, you've learned too much at this point to live that way. Like, your discernment is on a heightened level with the Ace of Swords. But it's something about a return to innocence, and that's a song too, like a real soothing kind of song. A return to innocence that again puts you in a position to feel like unstoppable, to feel like you can do no wrong in a way, or literally, quite purely, because your submission is to truth and to integrity. So that means, like, again, you can trust yourself and trust your instincts to lead and guide your actions in a way that curb insecurity and curb reluctance and things like that. That's what it's given here with the Six of Cups. It's really an emphasis on being able to trust yourself in the way, and trust something about trusting how can I say this? Like, not the innocence and purity or it's like restoring your trust in life, at least in the one that you're creating. It's like, I'm trying to find a way to say this, because through all that you've been through, it can kind of, here it is, it can kind of, grow a callus on your heart space. And that can affect your fluidity, which again does arouse the insecurities and things like that, and the apprehensions that keep us from living that best life, so to speak. And that's just by circumstance and, conditioning and so on and so forth. In some ways necessary, because there was a lot against you. But it's something about restoring that innocence about life where it's not void of the healthy boundaries that you've learned and the instincts that you've acquired on account of that, to know what's good for you and what's not. You know exactly what to do with all that, but it also kind of breaks down that callus that often keeps you from experiencing the fullness of life that was actually designed or assigned for you to have, that sometimes we forfeit because we live in fear or insecurity or whatever the case may be, based on previous experiences. So that's the return to innocence that I'm feeling here. It's more about being able to trust yourself with life because you trust yourself and because you're affirmed of the protection that, come on, man, you've affirmed of the protection that has always been covering you in the best of times and worst of times, and that certainly is more inclined to protect its assets now that you have become somewhat of an exalted inspiration for others to find their balance of peace and self-trust and esteem and supreme esteem as well. It's like you've become a precious commodity to the divine now. So if you were protected before, you absolutely are at this point in time. So it's even like a double layer of affirmation of not, if you were ever uncertain about that fact, you should know at this point just how covered you truly are, and also for what purpose, which further infuses your confidence and courage to continue living in that vein. There's a word or a phrase I want to sum this up. Maybe it'll come at the end, but let me just get one more. It's just supreme self-esteem. That's the gift. And I know I speak on that a lot, but that's what it's given. The Page of Swords. And it kind of fell out in a struggle in a bit, because maybe for some it's fascinating overall, but some may get it and some may not. Even some may study you till their head explodes or till their eyes fall out their socket, and they might still not catch the vibe or understand your come from. And then again, like I said, some absolutely may, in their own regard and in their own right, may observe how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, listening to the words that you say, through your testimony, through your watching your actions, maybe your business moves or decisions, and how you care for your family, how you love your partner, how you raise your children. It could be a number of things that are fascinating and remarkable to observe. And as I said, for some, it'll be in high regard, and maybe for some, not so much, and then maybe everything in the middle, more than likely. But it's of no consequence to you at this point. And again, that further doubles down on the supreme self-esteem, because humanly speaking, that sense of acceptance and understanding is what we crave. But this is someone that has worked that out about themselves through, in disparaging ways, or through desperate measures at times, And so now, where you might find yourself the most confident to kind of express yourself, pop out, share your experience, be on display, be in the public eye, or whatever, the case may be, just to live out loud, let's say, is when you may experience a heightened expression of opinion. Let's just say blanketly opinion, because it could be for or against or whatever. You've already conditioned yourself again to encourage yourself. And also, you've grounded yourself in all the best ways to not allow the praise and the applause or the fascination and admiration to spoil you either, to veer into that arrogant or egotistical human, primal nature that none of us are particularly immune to. So it's just really about the balancing of this supreme self-esteem, no matter what the stimuli or resistance may be from the outside in particularly, and certainly not allowing anything from the inside out to take precedence over the purity of this new elevated nature that you have curated in divine alignment. It's supreme self-esteem. I said supreme esteem at its finest. That's the gift. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. I mean, like, balanced. That's what that's giving me. The Four of Pentacles. Adversely, it could be some trying to ground you or bring you back down to some comfortable accessibility that they can access. That's the side. But for me, with the Four of Pentacles, is something about stability here. And it speaks to what I'm just saying, like knowing how to stay leveled, even with all that you are being exalted into. And this is a divine appointment, so it can't be refuted by human anyway. But there are still ways that we can choose to be depreciated if we allow ourselves to defer to our lower frequencies exclusively. So it's really, again, just affirming, like, this is the elevation, this is the exaltation that's coming from a divine ordinance. So you can't, it's happening no matter what, but you get to employ all of the aspects of yourself, the instincts, the knowing, the experiences, the best bets, whatever, everything. You get to ball it all up and roll it all up into this new appointment of identity, a new expression or evolved expression, elevated expression of identity that is very much so earned. It's very much so earned. And there it is, coming all the way back around to one, like to be affirmed in no uncertain terms of who you've been to gain such an appointment and such a to be exalted in the way that you have been, and maybe just sheerly the fact that you are is the revelation, not even realizing just how exalted you actually are in this moment, how revered, how appreciated, how celebrated your presence is And that's to the divine more than it, or if it ever or never is by anything, again, walking and living and breathing on the ground. And if that's all it ever is, that's all that even matters. And let that be a grounding concept for how you carry on. This is beautiful. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, I leave you with peace.